So speaking of sports that I grew up watching, the two
That you no
sports that
longer
I
pay
grew up
attention to.
watching
That I no longer
are
pay
now
attention to.
are now destitute, and that is NASCAR and baseball.
Yeah.
So breaking news today was baseball finally came up with the players and the owners and the Players Association finally came up with a way to make a season happen.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball was in the driver's seat, in my opinion, as soon as everything shut down because of the pandemic.
Right.
It was clear to me that baseball had a real chance to make a resurgence because baseball has not fallen off a cliff in recent years, but there's been a steady decline in baseball viewership.
Absolutely.
The only real money in the sport are the TV deals. Certain teams like the Dodgers are very well supported. They have a lot of fans go to their games. I think Dodger Stadium is the most Instagrammed location in the world, I want to say.
Wow.
It's very or high on the list anyway. Most check-ins or most posts or whatever. So certain teams are doing very well, but for the most part, baseball has slipped and lost traction to other sports, NBA, NFL, even soccer, both internationally and domestically.
And domestic, right?
So did you watch Long Gone Summer? Because that dropped, I think, last weekend, which kind of brought me back to I don't want to even say the heyday of baseball.
The glory years of baseball.
Yeah, I was a baseball fan like during the strike years when it was absolutely like a bunch of jabronis out there trying to play catch on a field, and I still was watching it for whatever reason. But so what did you think of Long Gone Summer? Because you're not really a baseball guy. You're by no means a baseball purist,
well,
right?
What's funny is that I was, to your point,
Yeah.
and I had the similar type of epiphany down the line where, number one, it was so long, right? Although I've taken a different stance on the baseball season that we can explore at a later time. But back.
Oh, by the way, 60 games this year. If we can do this in 60 games, then what the hell are we doing it for 160 games?
Because that money. That's
that
what
TV money, baby.
That's what that ad revenue. But no. So I was so geeked when I found out that there was this show on ESPN that only played baseball highlights. I think it was called Baseball Tonight back in the day. Exactly. When I remember being like, I think it was 8-9 years old, and I'm like, there's a show that only shows you baseball highlights. This is amazing. You get to watch all the games and da-da-da-da. So I was deep into the baseball cards, like into the collecting and all that. Okay. And then 94 hit. And when 94 hit, I pulled the cord and I was like, I'm out. Like,
you stuck with it. You were one of those people that,
dude. It was so, yeah. I never really did, because it was one of those things.
Strike.
Well, because it kind of hit during my formative years, right, as I was starting to diversify my my sports content, if you will, to your point. And it's at this point where baseball is kind of out of the picture, and all of a sudden you have NBA. Michael Jordan is out, but there's the rest of the league that's kind of going through. And then at this point,
you didn't want to watch the jabronis?
No, I did not want to watch the jabronis.
People's dads.
Like, hey, Phil, you're up. Go. You're next up to bat. Yeah, and not just that, the NFL, right? And this is during the Cowboys' heyday of like 92, 93. 94 they're in the championship game. They don't make it to Super Bowl. 95 they win again. So at this point, football is gaining traction on my radar. You know what I mean? You got Brett Favre, you got Barry Sanders, you got Steve Young, you got Aikman and the triplet. You got the whole thing. Irvin. Yeah, exactly. Irvin.
Dion.
So all of a sudden my attention starts to go elsewhere. And where I was once that little kid that loved Baseball Tonight, eventually it kind of waned. And so it was interesting reliving the 98 season, because I remember that in real time. That was right before I got to college. And I do remember it being a very huge deal, to the point where kind of the nation as a whole was entranced by this thing. And it's so interesting because it really hasn't happened since then, where you have two guys conceivably going after the record at the same time and, kind of sort of battling. I hit a home run, you hit a home run, you hit two.
Yeah, all the way to the end. I mean, 3 guys before the All-Star break, and then it really boiled down to 2. So what was like your big, so as you're watching Long Gone Summer, what did you not remember that it brought back to life for you?
Well, okay, right off jump, and actually one of our Twitter followers brought this up. I was having a little discussion with one of them. The fact that Griffey was in the mix for a little bit. Totally forgot that Ken Griff Jr. was was actually
And he had been doing it for
for a
years, right?
while,
Like
right?
he
Exactly.
was the
I think he was the guy that everybody expected to get it. If
Yeah.
somebody was going to get it, they kind of expected him.
Well, the
So
overall record, everyone thought Griffey Jr. was gonna, the kid was gonna get the overall home run,
yeah,
the Hank Aaron record. Yeah.
right. So there was that. I forgot about the third player, kind of the third amigo in that kind of dropped off, but that was very much there for a good chunk of that. And then number two, I just forgot how freaking huge Mark McGuire was. Like
Huge dude.
how just like I think he's like what 6'4", 6'5", something like that. He's
They
just
said when he was drafted, he was 6'5", like 230 or something.
yeah,
like that.
that's as a pitcher, right? Because he was coming out as a pitcher. Or
Well, he was a
something like
pitcher at USC.
At USC?
He wasn't drafted as a major leaguer as a pitcher because USC figured out like, oh, this guy can crush a baseball.
Yeah.
We should move him to first base so we can play him every day instead of every 4 days or however many,
Yeah.
however often college pitchers pitch. But yeah, I mean, he was a huge dude. Team USA, like just a baller.
He was a monster.
Like,
yeah, he was just and I had forgotten too that even his rookie year he crushed like what 48, 49 bombs, something like that,
yeah.
like right off
set the rookie record.
Yeah, exactly, right off jump. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the things that in rewatching it, revisiting it, that I was like, oh man, I had forgotten about Griff, and then just watching. Well, it's also interesting too watching non-high def footage. Yeah, watching the old baseball clips.
They're like, welcome back to the 1998. You're like, what the hell did people see back then? Oh my god.
So those were the two.
I think we had to imagine a lot of things. Like it's like, well, we
you
really can't
you couldn't
tell.
actually see it. You can't see
Yeah,
it.
like
So.
you can't argue balls and strikes from home because you really can't tell.
You can't tell which one. Yeah. What about you? Was there something in particular that stuck out to you as far as kind of like as you were piecing it together?
Yeah, how obvious that these guys were juiced. Like these guys were hitting freaking bombs. Like, I mean, unbelievable distance on some of these. Like Sammy Sosa was hitting every home run in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know how hard it is to leave Wrigley on that side of the field to the streets?
Do it regularly.
Yeah, like every single one. You see the fans at towards the end of the home run race. They're just standing in the street waiting for him to drop one on them because that's every single time he pulls the ball. He's hitting it in the streets. Mark McGuire was drawing a couple thousand people to batting practice every day just because he would hit 500 footers in batting practice. Like the distance that these guys were putting on the ball was like so freaking obvious that there was now they had great swings, they had launch angle, they had all the things that people drive analytics at now to get. They just, like Mark McGuire said it, he's like, my swing was naturally good at putting the ball in the air and getting it to fly over the fence, but
like I was just a baller from jump. I mean, it is what it is.
Freaking obvious. I mean, the guy had Andro in his locker when the press was huddled around him. It was sitting. He wasn't even trying to hide it.
But
like,
okay, so do you remember that back then? Like, well, Andro wasn't though. Andro was one of those things like
you didn't feel a little bit. It's one of those things like you didn't feel a little bit guilty about having Andro in your locker.
I think there's a clear delineation between and I'm totally speaking out of school here. I know none of this, right? So this is just me postulating. But it seems to me there's a difference between like stuff you can get over the counter that might mimic or help with the building of muscle versus full on injecting yourself with steroids. Like kind of like Canseco. Canseco's book was like, I had this regimen. I saw these people inject themselves.
Well, they were doing that too.
So, well, that's what I'm saying. So, but I'm saying that as far as just seeing the Andro there, it wasn't necessarily like a dead giveaway. And this was the beginning of like weightlifting and kind of the bodybuilding mentality spilling over into sports. So there was a lot kind of going on around there. And the contracts, right, dude? You hit 30 jacks, 40 jacks, 50 jacks. All of a sudden, you go from making 3, 4, 5 million to 10 million, 15 million a year. That's a huge incentive.
Well, the other thing that stuck out to me is like now you see guys that hit jacks, but they only hit jacks. They're like two outcome hitters, meaning like they're either hitting swinging a bomb or they're whiffing, right? Yeah. And you see these guys all the time. These guys were hitting for average too. Like McGuire was like a 300 hitter, right? Yeah. Sosa was the RBI champion and hitting at a high level. Yeah. They weren't just trying to swing for the fence. Yeah. Just when they connected, the ball was flying like 490 feet off their bat. So it was just, I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again, where these guys were just going blow for blow, hitting colossal jacks every single night. Like when Barry did it, he didn't have like another Barry, right? It was just like,
no, he was just
Barry
by himself.
Hit 73 in San Francisco, but and he was same thing. Like he was dropping them deep into the bay every single time. It was like, how the hell is this guy hitting the balls this far? And Barry Bonds, by the way, not a huge dude by nature. He's no McGuire in like when he was drafted, he didn't look like McGuire. He looked like an average, size dude that just
Who
got
happens to be
massive.
6'5" and just huge.
No, I don't think Bonds is 6'5".
Oh, I'm sorry, Bond. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, Bonds
no,
is like
Bonds is like
6
6
foot.
Yeah, 6 foot.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, he was fat. He was like a speed
yeah.
guy when he was drafted. All of a sudden, he's just freaking jacked, hitting these massive home runs in the Bay. And if you Google Barry Bonds today, he's like a tiny dude again. Like he just has a big head, but he's like a tiny dude. Like he rides his bike all day and he's tiny.
Well,
I actually saw him at an MC Hammer concert.
Did you? Was he?
And I was like, holy shit, that's like Barry Bonds, but smaller, like way smaller.
Well, I got some numbers for you here, and it's funny because in the documentary they mentioned like, oh, we'll never see anything like this again, right? And then 2 years later, Bonds crushes the record by 3.
Right.
So,
but he had the formula. He had the juicing formula.
I'm just saying. Okay, so Ruth hits 60 in. He hits 59 in 1921. He hits 60 in 1927. Then Maris waits about 30 some odd years before he hits 61 in 1961, right?
Okay. By the way, Maris hitting 61 is far and away the most impressive thing ever, right? Now that we know what we know.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
you look at his build, like he looks like you talk about like the replacement players, right? In 94, that's what he looked like.
They all look like that.
They look like that. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
They didn't eat right. They didn't lift weights. They were just dudes, like. With really great hands and eyes.
But then, so those are the 3 numbers, right? 59, 60, 61, and that's Ruth, and Maris.
And then we get to number.
Then we get a
30-year lag.
And then all of a sudden we get to 98, where Sammy hits 66 and McGuire hits 70. 99, where McGuire still crushes 65. I forgot about that. The next year he
low key hits 65.
Low key.
No one talked about it.
Still beats the record. And by the way, so did Sosa, because Sosa in 99 hit 63. So 65, 63 the following year, right?
A lot of bombs in 2 years.
Still a lot of bombs, right?
Almost 130 bombs.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden in 01, like to your point, Bonds comes in and cleans up at 73. So all of a sudden.
By the way, Bonds, when he did that, was like 37, 38 years old. Like it wasn't, it's like when Roger Clemens got good again, you're like, okay, like you can't get good again at 37 and like in any sport.
All you got to do is eat right, take your vitamins, make sure you eat plenty of protein, stretch,
and slam steroids.
Yeah. That too. And so
and
you had this,
you
had this weird like 4-year stretch where dudes are like crushing into the 60s.
Yeah,
and then,
Brady Anderson, who was like a pedestrian player,
hit like 50, I think.
50, and he had like 37 by the All-Star break. It was like he kind of fell off and hit 50. Like he was on pace to hit like 90 or whatever it was.
And so Bonds hits 73 in 01, and then we don't get anybody close till 2017 where Giancarlo hits 59.
So 59 is a huge
59
number.
Is still a huge number, right?
The fact that Giancarlo stayed healthy for a season is amazing to me, by the way. That guy's falls apart every year.
But that's just so that.
And by the way, Giancarlo is he's a huge human being.
Yeah,
he's massive. Like he was drafted massive. He got more massive. Like he's like, if you told me he was juicing, then he would have to be juicing all the way back to like probably when he was born, because that's just a big man.
So it's just interesting that we had that like little like 3.5-4 year stint from like 97 to 01 where people are just like, that hallowed 60 number is being reached, two, couple players, 3 players, so that was it kind of, after watching that the documentary, it kind of made me go into a deep dive of like, well, okay, I want to remember kind of what these guys were doing and what the numbers look like, and the numbers look like crazy, right? They totally stand out when you're looking at all the numbers. Because I mean, when you look back, like 96, Andres Galarraga hits 47 in the National League. 97, Larry Walker hits 49.
Doesn't count.
So it goes 47, 49, and then all of a sudden, boom, 70, 65, 50, 73. It's just like,
so up until that point, as a baseball fan and as a baseball purist, I looked at the batting title was like, that was my favorite player, the guy who hit for the best average.
The Silver Slugger, is that what it is?
No, just like the guy who wins the batting title. So like if you go back and look at like the average of the guy, like when Tony Gwynn was in his prime, he was winning batting titles at 380, 370, really high average. I mean, everyday player hitting 380, nobody does that anymore. Like Mike Trout is like the best player in the world, and he's probably like a 320 hitter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Like that's a great average. He also hits for power. He also steals bases. He's a 5-tool player. And he puts fans in the seats. But at the same time, like, for me, the best player in baseball was the guy who gave his team the most opportunities to get on base, to get innings started, to especially in the National League, to produce small ball, to kind of produce runs. And then we go to these big home run races that we saw in 97, 98, and up until maybe the last 10 years, we haven't seen him anymore. But it changed the game in the sense that, like, you probably couldn't name the guy who won the batting title for the last
idea.
10 years because no one even talks about average anymore. Who cares about average? Produce runs, RBIs, kind of, home runs, obviously, that's what gets you paid. Bryce Harper's made a ton of money batting 270 for his whole career. Like, him and Mike Trout came in the league at the same time. Mike Trout bats, 320 to 315. Bryce Harper, 260 to 275. Pretty much make the same amount of money.
It seems like they kind of they diverge, and like you're either hitting for average or hitting for power, but it's rare that you get the
well, I think
package.
the power stats on both of them are pretty similar. Just Bryce Harper swings and misses a lot, and Trout puts the ball in play. So he has the speed to run out ground balls and get on base. So he's just a better player in almost every way. But you just don't see people hit for average anymore. It's not a sexy thing for teams to go grab a 330 hitter. Or like D. Gordon was you don't even
I don't even know who you're talking about.
Don't even know who D. Gordon is,
No.
but he was leading the league in average for a long time because he would hit like a nubber on the infield and run it out and get a single, and he'd bat almost 400, high 300s doing that. But he never got paid for that. I mean, he never got a big contract or anything.
But it's interesting too that in doing my deep dive, come to find out, baseball and kind of bringing it back around, right? I think this would have been their opportunity to grab those eyeballs, because since '94, since that strike, they really never recovered as far as attendance, eyeballs, all of that stuff. There's
no reason why we couldn't be playing baseball right now. I mean, baseball in the sense of the pandemic is the most socially distanced sport.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could play the NBA in July, then you could play baseball in June, right? Like that. I mean, other than the locker room, like there's going to be some nuances around how players come and go.
Yeah.
Like baseball is so much more possible than basketball or hockey or some of these other sports.
A lot less touching, right? Everybody's kind of in a set place.
When you're considering like other countries have started their baseball and soccer, and so anyway, baseball could have filled that gap of like a team sport, a true team sport. I don't want to go down the road of NASCAR as a team sport, but baseball is that team sport that we could have had. And the fact that they screwed this up and they're going to be one of the latest things to the party is just a nightmare for them, because they could have capitalized on this and they didn't. It's a bummer.
It totally is. I agree 100%. They could have been the first one there and kind of captivated the whole United States, right? They would have been the only show in town. So
yeah, it could have had a resurgence, a 98-esque resurgence, especially if there were some good stories coming out of this year. Now they're talking about, is there even going to be any credibility around a World Series win? Whoever wins the World Series in 2020, which is going to happen like clear in November, by the way. Another developing story is like, okay, let's look at the 4 best ranked teams in baseball, right? It's like Minnesota, New York, all these cold weather cities. And it's like, how are the playoffs going to work in a cold weather city in November,
when it's actually in the cold,
especially if there's a pandemic still around?
Right.
Like, can you imagine huddling into Yankee Stadium in November with however many people are allowed there to go?
Yeah. I don't know.
You got to wear a mask and you got to do all these things. So that's another
logistical,
situation.
right?